chemistry at Austin College. It gives me great pleasure to present one of the preeminent social networking professionals in the group today, Dr. Karen Stevenson.
Thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. As you can probably tell from my background, I don't fit in the box. In fact, I'm not anywhere near the box. And mostly through my career, people have been trying to stuff me into a box. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the mechanics, the quantum mechanics of trust, and talk to you about the structure of culture. And thank goodness I had scientific training in quantum mechanics and also in mathematics, because I brought that field to the field of anthropology to really try to peek under the covers of culture. Everywhere I've been, and when I listen to when people talk about successes and or failures, they are pointing the finger, usually of blame, at culture. But yet no one can really quantify culture. No one really explains it very well. And it's a scapegoat. So I thought we should really understand culture. It's not really the command and control structure. It may be something else. And in fact it is. It's these relationships of trust which we take for granted. We typically don't measure. So therefore we're not aware of the impact that they have on us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that this morning. And in order to do that, I thought it would be helpful to give you a look into early days. The picture that you see of these anthropologists, they're anthropologists, not terrorists, that are walking out to the pyramid of Saqqara, unreconstructed pyramid in Saqqara in Egypt. This is some of the early work I did, because in trying to piece together extinct cultures, one has to look at how they traded goods with each other and how they settled their cities with each other, in a community or between civilizations. So the early research that was spent on reconstructing social or trade networks was done here in Egypt, also Mesoamerica, and looking at the ancient trade networks between the Tigris and the Euphrates. So this work from long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away was looking at archaeological ruins. This is another image inside the Valley of the Kings. And the fellow in the hat, it's not a fedora, but I can assure you, he was Indiana Jones long before the screenplay was ever written. And what we're doing there is trying to deconstruct using iconography of art as well as the burial remains to reconstruct ancient trade networks and the relationships between different cities within Egypt. And of course, the reason I'm showing you these early shots is because Egypt is still in the forefront today with mass changes that are going on. It's one of the longest running civilizations that we have today. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about how people are connected. So first let me begin. Why does most change fail? Well, when people think about who they're connected to, they typically look at their egocentric network. Egocentric is a technical term in social network analysis, which simply means I'm the ego and I'm at the center of my network. Or translated another way, I'm at the center of the universe. We all are. We're at the center of our own universes. And we rely upon our colleagues and our friends to give us information. And we rely even further on that because we trust them. So an example of an egocentric network from one of my students is this. This could be you. They're colored differently, representing the different areas of the fields, different agencies that other people belong to. The circles or the nodes that are at the end of this is the person in the middle. Hold on, let me show you right here. And the nodes at the end represent individuals, and the lines are their reported relationships. What happens, though, is that these egocentric networks are seductive because I've got a lot of colleagues and friends. I trust them. I think I'm getting good information. And so because they are giving me this information, I can be deluded by that information. And the reason I'm deluded is because I do trust folks. I trust that information. The irony is that it's not my egocentric network that is going to give me the complete picture. It's really the entire network of multiple agencies working together, or the network within an organizational culture. So an egocentric network is simply a drop in the bucket, or it's like a little drop of water in a tsunami of the way people are connected with each other. And this would be an example of a Milky Way of connections. My students' egocentric network is in this Milky Way of connections. This is a picture from LinkedIn. And this is how we're interconnected. Now this is interconnected in a sort of a cyber way, but let's look at the connections that bring us here together in this room today. One of the things I want to emphasize is that it's just not about connecting. It's not about the traffic of connection. It's really trying to understand the stickiness of that connection in terms of how we trust one another. Now, an organization, I think it's through McKinsey, said that 80% of human knowledge is not written down in rules. I don't really know where that 80% came from, and I don't care. I just know it's a big number. And in the same way that most communication, 90% of it is nonverbal, one can also say that the knowledge within organizations means much more than just what we store in our computers or in the clouds or in our documents or in our handhelds. It also comes from the implicit, tacit relationships which we share with one another over the years because we work with one another. Even we may not be in the same agency or the same organization, but I can pick up a telephone and I can call someone from 20 years ago and connect them with a person where I know those resources need to be exchanged. So this concept is called social capital, and it's really very important. The irony is, though, is that in most organizations, social capital is recognized but not measured. Now, why would that be? Because social capital is credible, it's now measurable, we have the technology and the mathematics to do it. Why are we not measuring it more uniformly? 5 years ago, I said, at a keynote similar to this, that everyone in every organization would be measured according to social capital standards. And I'm standing here before you this morning to tell you and admit to you I was wrong. They're not measuring social capital in every organization. But I am going to go on the record today, and I am going to tell you 5 years from now, you are going to see standard social capital measures in organizations. So just remember, 5 years from now, we're going to see this. So that is usually the missing link in a value equation that's trying to measure the knowledge inside an organization that's held inside its people. Human capital measures have been beautifully worked out, and I think the government is one of the leading, or the U.S. government is one of the leading organizations in understanding and cataloging human capital. I think it does a better job of it, quite frankly, than a lot of private sector firms. There is no standardization out there, and in fact, that's one of the things I'm working with SHRM, trying to standardize these measures. But social capital is something that is still not standardized, and I would make a plea and an argument on why we need to do that. Because what goes inside social capital are these human relationships, which can be measured. Now, why do I care about social capital? Let me explain. Oliver Williamson won the Nobel Prize in economics for the bottom two words at the bottom of this pyramid, transactions and authority. Transactions are when we exchange our business cards even if we don't know one another. We think we might know one another or meet each other later. Or if I'm purchasing something on the internet, like an airplane ticket on my next vacation or my next business trip, or I go to my ATM and I'm trying to get cash for the weekend. That's a transaction. It's clearly understood. There are very well understood protocols that control for the transaction, because I can tell you, if there were any uncertainty associated with that transaction, there'd be a lot of lawsuits. So transactions are clean, simple, cheap and cheerful, and people transact with each other all the time. They're exchanging little bits of information. You don't really have to know each other very well in order to trade in that information. You're just moving that information down the chain. If there is a little bit of uncertainty, which is what Williamson called asset specificity, we just love these academic terms, don't we? But any uncertainty or ambiguity associated with the exchange of information or with the partners involved in that exchange may require a mediating force, such as authority. And authority is very important because it can control for uncertainty because someone's going to be in charge, someone's going to give orders, someone's going to follow orders, and it's more characteristic of command and control systems. These are systems we all understand very well. But the highest degree of uncertainty can only really be mediated by a human trusted relationship. Trust can absorb, it's like an amazing shock absorber. It can take a lot of uncertainty, a lot of ambiguity, and still withstand. Just look at the people that ran into the Twin Towers on 9/11. There was a lot of uncertainty associated with that, and there were a lot of powerful relationships that have been changed ever since because of that. Now, these three different types of relationships represent about the last 150 to 200 years of academic research, which, lucky for you, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail over. And that's why I've drawn this little triangle. But they each have organizational outcomes. For instance, transactions were often thought to typify marketplaces of exchanges. But the truth is, the knowledge market inside any organization or that exists in government between agencies, cooperating agencies, that's a knowledge marketplace, and we're transacting all the time, trading knowledge. And we'll do that either face-to-face or we'll do it face-to-face using tweets. So it's either the twitches on your facial muscles where you're in person in proximity, or you could be doing it through tweets. But the point is you're moving information back and forth. There's no uncertainty associated with it. If there is a little bit of uncertainty, then you typically form teams, organizations. In the private sector, they're called firms. So the firm is a word that usually represents a barrier to entry of some sort because we share common values around an idea or problem that we're trying to solve. And when we do solve for it, we can sell that product or sell that service from the firm into the marketplace. So we can sell it through transactions. The one thing that economists have now come to realize, maybe even more relevant than what goes on with authority and transactions, is how can you manage, how can you quantify trust-based relationships? Because they are typified by an organizational structure called a network. Now you can have transactional networks, you can have sort of a chain of commands or linear supply chains that you can draw as networks. But the network of trust is something that people sort of take for granted, and they don't understand that it has a very powerful structure to it, and that structure can be measured. It can be measured just like you can measure any human capital system. So I'm going to explain what I mean by showing you a very tiny network consisting of 3 people. Now, people call me Dr. Karen. This is going to sound a lot like Dr. Phil. I'm only going to borrow him for just a moment to explain what I mean here. Let's imagine that you are at the top of that little triangle of people, and that's your avatar, that smiley face. And then to the left of you, that is your spouse or significant other, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, girlfriend, someone you dearly and deeply love, and therefore the relationship is signed positively. This is a signed graph. Your spouse or significant other absolutely and dearly loves his or her mother to the right. Now, just before I have anybody get angry with me, I know this is going to sound very sexist, but I am the anthropologist, and I can tell you that mother-in-law jokes are common across all cultures. So just go with me on this. So now you've got the mother-in-law. So let's imagine, and I'm sure this never happens to anyone here in this room, that you have a disagreement with your spouse or significant other. Well, this happens occasionally. Well, faster than the speed of light, we call it the speed of trust, the mother-in-law finds out about it and puts the squeeze on you because you are not treating her offspring in the manner to which he or she has become accustomed. So now all of a sudden you're feeling the squeeze. And that, my friends, this little triangle is the beginning of all politics, because the egocentric network that you have in this, you at the top of the pyramid there, is those 2 direct relationships, the one with your mother-in-law and the one with your spouse or significant other. But you do not have direct control over the 3rd relationship. And it's that, and the only thing you have over that 3rd relationship is influence.